The urban legends to follow are not myths or tall tales. They are, in fact, truth. Number 1. The Fallen Angel from Japan. One of Japan's most infamous ghost stories, based on a photo taken during the filming of a popular psychic television show. The girl was a guest in the audience, and the photo was one of the many random snapshots taken throughout the day. When reviewing the photographs, the next day the staff could not believe it when they stumbled across this frightening image. The girl's face was completely drained of color, eyes blank, gazing eerily out across the room at what seemed like something far away. Even more disturbing is the angle in which the girl's neck is gruesomely twisted. It's distorted and turned far beyond any normal human range. At first, many claimed this to be nothing more than a hoax set up by the channel to gain ratings. Following this incident, details were released which proved the photo of the girl was real. Almost. It seems someone had, in fact, photoshopped the image to make it more extreme before releasing it to the media. Even so, the original is still unsettling. Number 2. Someone to watch over me. Over the years, we've heard the whispers uttered by those who've seen into the darker realms surrounding this world. The tale of seeing a dark, shadow-like presence watching you from the corner across the room when you wake during the night is most unsettling. This legend actually took place a number of years ago in a slightly different scenario. A gentleman living in a tiny apartment had started to get the feeling that he was no longer alone. His belongings started to disappear. The faint sounds of tapping and quiet, invisible footsteps began. The kitchen pantries would open randomly while he was in another room. Eventually, he could no longer take not knowing what was happening to his home, so he called investigators to come to his house. It wasn't long at all after they arrived that the culprit was found. A very petite elderly woman in her late 80s was discovered hiding in a large crevice behind some kitchen cabinets. When the woman was questioned, she admitted she had snuck in over a year before and took up residence in the gentleman's crawlspace. Number 3. Don't lose your head. We've all heard the tale of the man who becomes trapped in the entrance to the elevator and, despite his desperate attempts, cannot break free before the force of the elevator's motion completely decapitates him. This is not just another myth, but actually took place. A doctor approached the elevators after surgery. As he went to step across the threshold, the doors suddenly slammed shut, pinning the doctor directly between them. He was wedged too tightly to move as the elevator started to move upward. There was nothing the physician could do before losing his head. Number 4. A haunting Halloween. Our next legend comes from a haunting example that things aren't what they seem. It is also completely true. It comes from a small neighborhood that participated every year in elaborate Halloween festivities and held contests of which home displayed the most authentic decorations. A few days before All Hallows Eve, a magnificent, life-sized dummy appeared hanging from a tree limb in the yard of a vacant home at the edge of the block. No one was sure who did it, but they thought it was a great ornament for the holiday theme and very lifelike. Days later, some neighbors became suspicious when a foul odor spread throughout the surrounding streets. When they approached the hanging object, they found it was not a dummy at all. It was the rotting corpse of a young woman from the town who had hung herself 3 days before. Number 5. It's something in the air. The 5th urban myth on our list is nothing less than bizarre. In fact, it's almost like a horror film. In the mid-90s, a cancer patient entered the ER in a terrible state and had to be immediately rushed to emergency surgery. The surgeons were prepped and ready to start the procedure, but moments after making the first incision, toxic fumes began to fill the small room. Every nurse and doctor present blacked out. When they awoke, they could not move. Their limbs and bodies were totally paralyzed. The toxic air was so strong that even the staff members who entered the room afterward to help the injured individuals were also affected. 23 people total all displayed signs of infection and paralysis after being exposed to toxic fumes that were expelled by only a small single cut in the patient's flesh. Number 6. Don't look under the bed. We all know the children's stories of horrific monsters hiding under the bed. Good thing, as adults, we know there's really nothing scary lurking beneath us while we sleep at night. The legend of the weary couple who decides to book a hotel room for the night because they are too tired to keep driving is a popular one indeed. But this is anything but an urban legend. Cities in Kansas, Florida, and Atlantic City have all had this nightmare become a terrifying reality. The reported guests awoke in their rooms one morning to a horrendous smell. Looking for the source, they quickly found what they were searching for: a decaying corpse rotting underneath the mattress, just inches from where they slept peacefully the night before. Number 7. Dirty work. Another extremely popular myth strikes a chord with many people as their darkest fear: being buried alive. This woman in the legend wakes up to find herself in a coffin, buried deep within the dirt of her own grave. She struggles not to suffocate, crawling her way up to the surface. The true story is almost exactly the same. Years ago, there was a couple who had just gotten engaged. One day, the boyfriend goes on a rampage and begins to torture his fiancée after tying her up. He then shoves her unconscious body into an old box and buries her alive. She awoke sometime later to the horror of her reality. The only object she had with her was a diamond ring the boyfriend had given her. Amazingly, the ring was her saving grace. She was able to cut her ties with it and dig her way up to the top, just like the legend tells. Number 8. Creepy crawlers. Fear of creatures and insects infesting our homes and lives in the darkest hidden places is a very scary thought. The urban myth of worms laying eggs in our brain is enough to shoot shivers down anyone's spine. But is that so far-fetched? Of course, we'd like to think it's not possible, but according to medical records released about a case that occurred a little over a decade ago, it is possible. A man went to see his doctor, complaining of headaches and hearing scratching sounds inside his head. The doctor assumed it would be a normal case of migraines, until he looked into the man's eardrum closely. Inside, the doctor was horrified to find a nest of maggots. The infestation was severe, and not only had the writhing worms laid eggs, they were also reproducing inside of the length of the man's ear canal. Number 9. The kids are not all right. Family feuds can be difficult. It's often said that we always hurt the ones we love. Of course, in many ways this is true. However, in the legend of the Buckley family, it would simply be an understatement. Susan and John Buckley were sister and brother. One day, so it is told, the children decided to kill their mother. They found an axe, and they removed her head. When the police arrived to the bloody scene, the children were nowhere to be found. All that was left next to the headless remains was a picture of the three of them together posed in front of the house. Sometime after this grotesque slaying, a fake photo began to circulate that had been recreated from the original. The new picture shows the two children, side by side, holding the mother's head, staring nonchalantly into the camera. Number 10. Don't drink the water. You may remember the very old story about the family who moved into a house to find their water was completely black with a putrid odor. Soon they discovered the body of a missing college student at the bottom of their well. In 2013, guests of the Hotel Cecil started to notice complications with the water. It was beginning to emit a strong odor, sour taste, and was very discolored. Despite how alarming this would seem to most, the patrons of the hotel continued to use the water for a little over a week before calling the manager. Close to 7 days later, their search led them to the water tower located near the hotel. Professionals climbed hundreds of feet to the top of the tower. Floating inside, they had found the body of a college student who had disappeared from the hotel lobby 2 weeks earlier. How she was transported all the way to the top of the tower and lifted inside has never been explained.